next up we have, I wouldn't necessarily call this a classic movie, but from 1982, Visiting Hours, which is a slasher movie. Plot is almost interesting. This one outspoken woman, who big woman rights activist, gets attacked by a man and is sent to the hospital after a pretty vicious attack. But this guy's crazy and keeps trying to get into the hospital to finish her off. And throughout the movie, he also kills other women, and we get little flashback snippets about why he is the way he is. The movie itself isn't particularly unique. There's some mildly interesting story ideas here, but for most of the time, when the movie's not dragging, and it does drag a bit, it's like a competently made movie. It's just not a necessarily overly engaging movie, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, this was a first time watch for me. I always get this one, well, in the past I've always gotten this one confused with a couple of other type of medical or hospital themed movies. So I believe it was this movie, X-Ray, and Cardiac Arrest, or mainly based on the theme from the posters, because we all know after watching Cardiac Arrest, that was a very deceptive poster.
And I just read to butt in for just a second, and X-Ray is also known as Hospital Massacre, if anybody's more familiar with that name.
Yeah. So I've always kind of gotten those mixed up, at least before I had given any of them a watch. Just because, like I said, based on posters or the general plot, they all felt like they were somewhat, not exactly the same, but similar type themes. And so, yeah, I watched this one. There's some good, there's some bad, I'll just first move on to Michael Ironside, who I think is generally good or suitable to play like a slimy type of character like this. I think he has a very particular looking face that suits this type of role. So I think he did okay in this movie, but his character, we go through a big portion of the movie where he just doesn't talk. But then later on he does talk a little bit, which kind of reduces that silent presence that he had earlier in the film. And then there's also moments where I think they just showed him off too much or not enough. And I don't know, they just didn't really... I don't think they nailed the character. I think he has a good look for the character. They just didn't know where to take this character. And so I kind of wanted more or less from him. He either needs to be one of those characters where you don't know enough about him that you want to know more, or you get everything you possibly can from him, and I didn't get either. Plus he wears a leather wife beater, which...
It's quite fashionable.
It just... I mean... No. That's not a good fashion choice.
Well, the unfortunate thing is, I probably don't disagree with any of that, but I do think Michael Ironside, and he's not even an actor I particularly have seen in that many things. I might have seen him in 2 other movies.
You're missing him in Total Recall.
Indeed, I've not seen Total Recall. I'm assuming that's a movie that I've not seen. So Michael Ironside isn't even an actor I'm not familiar with, but I do think he was easily the most, if not interesting, the most memorable character in this movie. Because the main actress I think she's decent, she's okay, but it's not really a stand-up performance. And you have William Shatner, who appears every now and again, but he never amounts to anything. He's literally one of the least important characters in the movie. At least some of the people who are portioning the Gonies around are doing something useful. And I also liked the nurse character. I thought she was, a likable, poppy individual. But really Michael Ironside's performance is one of the only ones that really sticks out, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I didn't mind the nurse character. I thought the main character, the older lady that he's been trying to kill throughout the movie, she didn't really do anything for me. In many ways, this movie is a little bit ahead of its time, because it is kind of like one of those female empowerment type movies, but she doesn't quite become the empowering female that I thought she would be in the movie. Like, she spends pretty much the entire movie, like, just freaked out that she's gonna get killed. So, I don't know. Shit happens.
And actually, on a related note, for a slasher movie, this was pretty, in my opinion, it's pretty weak, as far as kills go.
I think they had some decent scenes leading up to what could have been, like, if only the actual kill itself was more memorable or violent or whatever. The setup towards those scenes were pretty decent. Yeah, it just never quite got to the point where all that memorable things happen throughout this movie.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, at least I noticed this. The movie is a bit long, it's like an hour and 45 minutes. And I think because of that, there are just certain parts of the movie which just felt like they're dragging a bit. Like, this is little, I guess you could call it a subplot, where the killer sort of hooks up with this one chick and then he abuses her and assaults her. And then she becomes a little important later on. But, and that, it leads somewhere, I guess, but it just didn't do much for me. It's the same with the killer becoming interested in going after the nurse. I mean, I guess there was a sort of creepy scene where he's in the house and, she's trying to protect her children, but again, it didn't do much to me. If they had, like, cut out a little, had shortened the movie a bit and had, just him in the hospital more, as opposed to, like, going on all these side quests, it would have been a bit more okay.
Yeah. The, towards the end, there's a scene where he pulls out all these pills and he starts removing his belt. And I couldn't help but think that, I don't know, this is just silly, but what those pills were. I was thinking, what, has he got some hardcore Cialis or something? He's taken off his belt, he's gonna have a good time. Shortly after, then we realize what he's doing, but...
I like that. I like how that's what you jump to.
Well, I mean, come on. If someone pulls out a whole bunch of pills and starts taking off their belt, I mean, what am I supposed to think?
I mean, I will say, what he actually does is probably some of the most intelligence he's shown in the movie. It's not like a genius plan, but hey, it works. Plus, that's probably that scene where it shows his arm cut up a bit. That's probably one of the most violent scenes in the movie.
In fact, another small funny thing, just when he does get taken to the or when he's in the hospital, and then the nurse looking at him says something like, if you need anything, just ask or beep the button or whatever. And as she's leaving, I noticed he doesn't have a pillow. I'd be like, can I get a motherfucking pillow?
Yeah, that seems like a very makeshift room on a side note.
Yeah. I mean, could have been a little more comfortable for someone in hospital.
Yeah, I have to say, for having as many police as they did at the hospital, having only a single one guard the room might have been a mistake. But that's police for you. I like the idea of, like, hospital-based slashes, and there's not that many of them. Halloween 2 is probably the best one in my opinion. But, I enjoy Hospital Massacre. I think it's not a great movie. Well, I think it's okay. But this movie, I have seen it before, and I actually remember liking it quite a bit more than I do now. I still think it's okay. It's just not particularly good. I mean, it's watchable. I mean, it's still an 80s slasher. But you can sort of see why not many people talk about this one as opposed to, The Burning, or any number of memorable, even The Mutilator. I mean, you can just see why this one sort of gets thrown under the bus. So I had to think about this one a bit. I was considering at one point maybe as high as a 7 out of 10. But the more I think about it, the more it just... some parts just really dragged out, at least in my view. And it had some charm to it, but I was hoping it would be a bit more enjoyable than it ended up being. And there were some okay ideas, but overall, I think more often than not it was almost tedious. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm also going with a 6. Michael Ironside is fine. I think he needed more or better writing for his character. Either show him a bit more, or show him a bit less. They kind of had that in between. It just didn't. It just didn't work for me. To be honest, towards the beginning of the movie, I actually felt like it was going to be a more enjoyable movie than it ended up being. Not to say that the scenes towards the end are the worst parts of the movie, because they're not. It's just, I think the interest in the character dwindled for the reasons that I mentioned before. Other than that, I thought the movie had some decent acting. For a movie in the early 80s, it seems to be presented fairly well for the type of movie that it is. It just doesn't end up being special. It didn't have any real memorable kills. I thought the main lady in the movie, she didn't add all that much. She's anti-violence, spends a whole movie kind of going, he's coming to get me.
I mean, she was right.
Well, yeah, but I felt the actual nurse character was more of a leading lady than this old lady was, so...
That might just be because you dislike feminists.
Yeah. Okay. So I just felt the movie could have been written a little bit better. It had some of the tools to make a good movie, it didn't get there.
And actually, just one more thing, because you reminded me, I actually think the beginning scene when she's going through the house and she's being attacked by the killer, and the ending scene where she's being chased, through the hospital, those are probably two of the best scenes in the movie, in my opinion, and everything else in between is where the problems come from.